The cancer took my mother slowly, then all at once. I watched her fade away over 18 months, her vibrant spirit dimming like a candle running out of wax, until that terrible October morning when I woke up and she was just gone. At 14, I thought I understood loss. I thought the worst thing that could happen to me already had. I was wrong. My father crumbled after the funeral. The man who had taught me to ride bikes and solve math problems and believe in myself became a stranger, who could not look at me without seeing her face, could not function without drowning his grief in bottles that multiplied like cancer cells throughout our house. Within 6 months he had lost his job, our home, and apparently his ability to be my parent. That was when Aunt Linda stepped in, swooping into our disaster with the efficiency of a social worker and the warmth of a winter storm. She was my mother's older sister, successful and childless by choice, living in a pristine suburban house that looked like a magazine spread and felt just as cold. "You will live with me now," she announced, not asked, while my father signed papers with shaking hands. "But understand this. I am not your mother. I am doing this out of obligation, not love. You will not be spoiled. You will not expect handouts. You will earn your keep and be grateful for the roof over your head." I was 14 years old, orphaned in every way that mattered, and she was already making it clear that her love came with conditions I had not yet learned how to meet. But I was desperate for stability, for someone to tell me I would be okay, so I nodded and packed my few remaining belongings into garbage bags and tried to believe this was salvation rather than just another kind of loss. Aunt Linda's house was beautiful and sterile, like living inside a museum exhibit about successful single women. Everything was white or beige or glass, nothing was comfortable, and I was given a spare bedroom that felt more like a hotel room than a home. The rules were simple: keep my grades up, do my chores, stay out of her way, and never, ever ask for anything that costs money. "I am not a bank," she would say whenever I needed school supplies or clothes that actually fit. "Figure it out yourself." So I did. I babysat for neighbors, walked dogs, cleaned houses, and learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed. I shopped at thrift stores and learned to sew patches over holes, to make meals from whatever was cheapest at the grocery store, to study by lamplight because my room was in the basement and the overhead bulb had burned out months ago. But I also studied like my life depended on it, because maybe it did. I threw myself into my coursework with the desperate intensity of someone who knew that education was the only ladder out of this hole I had fallen into. Mathematics became my sanctuary, science my escape, computer programming my secret language for talking to a world that made more sense than the one I was living in. My grades were perfect. Not just good, perfect. I tutored other students for extra money, won academic competitions, and slowly began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could build something better than the life I had inherited. When I was 17, my guidance counselor told me about a scholarship opportunity that would change everything. The Henderson STEM Foundation offered full rides to underrepresented students pursuing degrees in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. Full tuition, room and board, living expenses, even money for books and supplies. It was not just a scholarship. It was a complete transformation. A golden ticket to the kind of future I had only dared to dream about in the darkest hours of the night. I spent weeks on that application, crafting essays that laid my soul bare, gathering recommendation letters from teachers who believed in me more than I believed in myself, submitting transcripts that told the story of a girl who had refused to let tragedy define her limitations. I poured everything I had into those pages, my grief, my hope, my desperate hunger for something better. The application deadline was in February. They said decisions would be mailed by early April, in time for students to make their college plans. Every day after school, I would check the mailbox with hands that shook like autumn leaves, looking for the thick envelope that would mean yes, or the thin one that would mean try again next year. April came and went. Then May. Then June. Nothing. I called the foundation office once, my voice small and uncertain on the phone. The secretary was kind but unhelpful. "All decisions have been mailed," she assured me. "If you have not received anything, it likely means you were not selected. We are sorry." I cried that night like I had not cried since my mother's funeral. I had been so sure, so hopeful, so foolishly confident that my perfect grades and tragic backstory would be enough to earn me this chance. Instead, I was just another rejected applicant. Another dreamer who had reached too high and fallen back to earth with a sickening thud. Aunt Linda found me sobbing at the kitchen table and sighed like I was a broken appliance she would have to repair. "This is why I do not believe in false hope," she said, pouring herself a glass of wine while I fell apart 3 feet away. "You got your expectations too high. Community college is perfectly respectable. You should be grateful you have options at all." Community college. 2 years at the local campus, living at home, taking basic classes with kids who were there because they had nowhere else to go. It was not the future I had dreamed of, but it was what I could afford with my savings from years of odd jobs and weekend work. I enrolled that summer, numb with disappointment but determined to make the best of it. I would complete my general education requirements, transfer to a 4-year school if I could figure out how to pay for it, and somehow still find my way to the career in technology that felt like my true calling. Moving day for community college was nothing like the tearful, proud send-offs I saw other families having. Aunt Linda did not help me pack or offer to drive me to the dorms. She handed me $50 for emergencies and told me not to call unless someone was dead or dying. I loaded my few belongings into my ancient Honda Civic, a car I had bought myself with babysitting money, and drove to the tiny dorm room that would be my home for the next 2 years. It was the size of a closet, with cinder block walls and fluorescent lighting that made everything look sickly and sad. But it was mine. For the first time since my mother died, I had a space that belonged to me, where I could study and dream and plan without someone reminding me that I was a burden, an obligation, an extra mouth to feed. I was unpacking my books when I realized I had forgotten my winter coat in Aunt Linda's garage. The dorms were not well heated, and Minnesota winters were not forgiving to broke college students. I drove back to her house that evening, hoping to grab the coat, and maybe a few other things I had left behind. Aunt Linda was not home, but she had given me a key for emergencies. I let myself into the garage and started looking through the boxes of my belongings that she had unceremoniously packed away the moment I left. That was when I found it. Hidden behind a stack of Christmas decorations, covered in dust and cobwebs, was box labeled Mail, 2019, in Aunt Linda's precise handwriting. I almost ignored it. What did old mail matter now? But something made me pull it down and look inside. There were bills, catalogs, promotional materials, and there, at the bottom of the pile, was a thick white envelope addressed to me in official-looking font. The Henderson STEM Foundation. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely tear it open, even though part of me already knew what I would find. The letter was dated April 15th, nearly 6 months ago, and the words swam in front of my eyes as I tried to process what I was reading. Congratulations! We are delighted to inform you that you have been selected as a Henderson STEM Scholar for the 2019 to 2020 academic year. This prestigious award provides full tuition, room and board, and additional funding for educational expenses. I had won. I had actually won. The scholarship I had dreamed about, worked for, pinned all my hopes on. It had been mine. For 6 months, it had been sitting in this dusty box while I cried myself to sleep thinking I was not good enough, while I enrolled in community college with dreams that felt smaller every day, while I believed that the universe had looked at my application and found me wanting. But it was not the universe that had rejected me. It was Aunt Linda. I sat on that garage floor reading and rereading the letter until the words were burned into my memory. There were instructions for accepting the scholarship, deadlines that had long since passed, contact information for a program coordinator who was probably wondering why their newest scholar had never responded. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, doubling me over with rage and grief and disbelief. She had stolen my future. She had literally hidden the key to everything I had worked for, and let me believe I was a failure. She had watched me cry over this rejection and offered false comfort, while knowing exactly why that letter had never reached me. I drove back to her house in a fog of fury, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. She was home now, sitting in her perfect living room with a glass of wine and a book, looking like the picture of middle-aged contentment. "You hit it," I said without preamble, throwing the letter down on her coffee table. "You hid my scholarship letter." She looked up from her book with the kind of calm expression that told me she had been expecting this conversation eventually. "I did what I thought was best," she said simply, taking a sip of wine like we were discussing the weather. Best. The word came out as a shriek. You stole my future. You let me think I was not good enough when I had actually won. You were 17 years old, she replied, her voice maddeningly steady. You had no idea what you were getting into. A full scholarship to a prestigious university? The pressure would have destroyed you. You would have failed out within a semester and come crawling back here, even more broken than before. That was not your decision to make. I am your guardian. It was exactly my decision to make. She set down her wine glass and looked at me with something that might have been pity. You think I did this to hurt you? I protected you from something you were not ready for. Be grateful. Grateful. She wanted me to be grateful that she had sabotaged the biggest opportunity of my life, because she had decided, without consulting me, that I could not handle it. In that moment, something inside me crystallized into diamond-hard determination. I looked at this woman who had taken me in out of obligation rather than love, who had made me feel like a burden for 3 years, who had now revealed herself to be not just cold but actively destructive to my dreams, and I made her a promise she would never forget. You think I was not ready for that pressure? I said, my voice quiet but deadly serious. Let me show you what I can handle. I turned and walked out of her house, taking nothing but the scholarship letter and the burning need to prove her wrong about everything she had ever believed about me. The next few years were the hardest of my life, but also the most transformative. I could not accept the Henderson scholarship. The deadlines had passed, the cohort had been selected, that door was permanently closed. But I could use the rejection as fuel for something even bigger. I threw myself into community college with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I took the maximum course load every semester, studied until my eyes burned, joined every academic club and honor society available. I worked 3 part-time jobs, tutoring math, cleaning office buildings at night, and doing data entry from my dorm room, to save money for the next phase of my plan. More importantly, I started building the network and experience that would make me undeniable to future opportunities. I volunteered to teach computer programming to middle school girls through a local nonprofit. I started a study group for women in STEM fields that grew from 5 members to 50 in 1 semester. I applied for every internship, every research opportunity, every chance to prove that I was not just smart, but driven in a way that could not be taught or faked. My grades were not just perfect, they were legendary. Professors started using my work as examples for future classes. I won academic awards, research grants, recognition that came with both honor and scholarship money. Slowly, painfully, one small victory at a time, I was building the foundation for the future Aunt Linda had tried to steal from me. When I transferred to the state university as a junior, I did it with a full merit scholarship that covered everything the Henderson Award would have, plus a research assistantship that paid me to do the work I loved. I had not just recovered from her sabotage, I had transcended it. But I was not done yet. My senior year, I started a nonprofit organization called Future Forward, focused on providing mentorship and scholarship opportunities to young women from disadvantaged backgrounds who wanted to pursue careers in technology. The irony was not lost on me. I was becoming the adult I had needed when I was 17, the person who would have fought for my dreams instead of deciding I could not handle them. The organization took off faster than I had ever imagined possible. We secured funding from major tech companies, partnered with universities across the state, and within 2 years we had helped over 100 girls access higher education in STEM fields. My story, the girl who had overcome family tragedy and guardian betrayal to build something meaningful, became part of our marketing materials. That was when the media attention started. A local newspaper wrote a feature about Future Forward that mentioned my background. Then a regional magazine picked up the story. Then LinkedIn, where my post about perseverance in the face of sabotage went viral with over 2 million views and thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of having their dreams temporarily stolen by people who claim to have their best interests at heart. The speaking invitations started pouring in. Corporate conferences, university events, nonprofit galas. Everyone wanted to hear from the young woman who had turned betrayal into breakthrough, who had built success from the ashes of other people's limitations. And that was how I ended up on the TEDx stage. The theme of the conference was hidden potential, And they wanted me to talk about how obstacles could become opportunities. How the worst thing that happened to you could also be the best thing if you refused to let it define your ceiling. I spent weeks crafting that speech, every word carefully chosen to tell the story of transformation without revealing too much about the specific people who had tried to limit me. This was about inspiration, not revenge. This was about showing other young women that their dreams were worth fighting for, even when the people closest to them could not or would not see their potential. The day of the talk, I stood backstage in my best dress, a navy blue sheath that I had bought with my first nonprofit salary, and tried to calm my racing heart. This was the biggest stage I had ever been on, with an audience of over 1,000 people and live streaming to potentially thousands more. I peeked out at the crowd during the introduction, scanning the sea of faces for familiar ones. My college professors were there, some of the girls from my nonprofit, colleagues from the tech industry who had become mentors and friends. And there, in the back row, sitting stiffly in a chair like she was at a funeral instead of a celebration, was Aunt Linda. She had not contacted me in over 2 years. I had not invited her, had not even told her about the event. But somehow she had found out and decided to show up, probably expecting some kind of acknowledgement, some moment of reconciliation where I would thank her for the tough love that had ultimately made me stronger. She was going to be disappointed. When they called my name, I walked onto that stage with my head high and my heart steady. The lights were bright, the audience was silent with anticipation, and I had 18 minutes to tell the story that would define how the world saw me. I started with my mother's death, the way tragedy had reshaped my childhood and left me vulnerable to people who confused control with care. I talked about the scholarship letter, the moment of discovery, the choice between bitterness and determination that had shaped everything that came after. Someone I trusted decided that I was not ready for the opportunities one had earned. I said, my voice carrying clearly to every corner of the auditorium. They chose to protect me from what they saw as inevitable failure. But what they did not understand is that failure is not the worst thing that can happen to a dreamer. The worst thing is never getting the chance to try. I talked about the years of rebuilding, the way I had turned rejection into motivation and limitation into liberation. I shared statistics about the girls we had helped through Future Forward, the scholarships we had funded, the dreams we had made possible for young women who might otherwise have been told they were not ready, not smart enough, not worth the investment. We all have people in our lives who claim to know what we can handle. I continued, looking out at that sea of faces and feeling more powerful than I ever had before. Sometimes they are right, and their caution saves us from real harm. But sometimes they are wrong, and their fear becomes our ceiling. The key is learning to tell the difference, and having the courage to bet on yourself when no one else will. The applause when I finished was thunderous, a standing ovation that went on for what felt like forever. People were crying, cheering, rushing the stage to shake my hand, and share their own stories of overcoming other people's limitations. I looked out at that crowd, basking in the recognition and validation that came from finally being seen for who I really was rather than who someone else thought I should be. And there was Aunt Linda, still sitting in her back row seat, clapping with a face like carved stone. She was not smiling. She was not crying. She was not rushing to congratulate me or claim credit for the adversity that had shaped my strength. She was just watching me succeed in exactly the way she had decided I could not handle. Watching me receive the recognition she had tried to protect me from. Watching me build the future she had tried to steal. Bigger and brighter and more meaningful than anything that original scholarship could have provided. After the event, I was surrounded by well-wishers and potential collaborators, people who wanted to partner with Future Forward or invite me to speak at their own events. I was exchanging business cards and scheduling follow-up meetings when I noticed Aunt Linda, making her way through the crowd toward me. For a moment, I thought she might actually apologize. I thought she might acknowledge that she had been wrong, that I had been stronger than she gave me credit for, that her sabotage had ultimately backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Instead, she just stood there looking at me with an expression I could not quite read. "Congratulations," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "You have done well for yourself." "I have," I agreed, not offering any of the gratitude or recognition she might have been fishing for. "I suppose you think this proves something," she continued. gesturing vaguely at the stage, the crowd, the success that surrounded us. It proves exactly what it proves, I replied calmly. That I was ready for more than you thought I could handle. That your protection was actually sabotage. That the biggest favor you ever did me was showing me I could not count on anyone but myself. She flinched slightly at that, the first crack in her composed facade. I did what I thought was best, she said, repeating the same justification she had offered years ago in her pristine living room. And I did what I knew was necessary, I replied. I succeeded despite you, not because of you. I built this life in direct opposition to every limitation you tried to place on me. And the best part is that you got to watch it happen. I turned to rejoin my conversation with a program director from MIT, who wanted to discuss scaling Future Forward nationally, effectively dismissing Aunt Linda from my moment of triumph. She stood there for a few more seconds, probably hoping for some kind of reconciliation or acknowledgement that her tough love had somehow contributed to my success. When it became clear that no such moment was coming, she gathered her purse and her dignity and disappeared back into the crowd. I never saw her again. The TEDx talk has been viewed over 8 million times across all platforms. It launched a speaking career that has taken me to conferences around the world, generated partnerships with major corporations who want to support Future Forward's mission, and opened doors I could never have imagined when I was 17, and crying over a rejection that was not even real. Future Forward now operates in 12 states, has provided over $10 million in scholarships and support to young women in STEM, and employs a staff of 26 people who share my passion for ensuring that potential is never wasted due to other people's fears or limitations. I have been featured on the covers of magazines, invited to the White House for education policy discussions, and recognized by organizations around the world for my work in expanding access to technology careers for underrepresented populations. But the achievement I am most proud of is not any award or recognition or media coverage. It is the letter I received last year from a girl named Maria, a 17-year-old from a small town in Texas whose grandmother had tried to discourage her from applying to engineering programs because girls like us do not do things like that. Maria had seen my TEDx talk, applied for one of our scholarships, and was starting her freshman year at Caltech with full funding, and a support network of other young women who refused to accept other people's definitions of what they could achieve. You showed me that other people's limitations do not have to become my reality, she wrote. Thank you for proving that sometimes the best thing someone can do for your dreams is to try to kill them, because then you know exactly how strong they really are. I framed that letter and hung it in my office, right next to the original scholarship acceptance letter that Aunt Linda had hidden all those years ago. Both documents represent the same truth, that our potential is not determined by who believes in us, but by who we choose to become when belief is in short supply. I kept Linda's secret for years, never naming her publicly or seeking to damage her reputation through the media attention that surrounded my story. I did not need to destroy her to build my success. Her irrelevance to my journey was destruction enough. But I also never thanked her. Not in my speeches, not in my interviews, not in the book I eventually wrote about turning obstacles into opportunities. She had asked for gratitude for protection that was actually sabotage, and she received exactly what that request deserved. Nothing. She had wanted to shield me from pressure I supposedly could not handle. Instead, she had given me the greatest gift possible, the absolute certainty that I could handle anything, because I had already survived the worst betrayal imaginable and transformed it into triumph. She had tried to hide my future. I had made sure she got a front row seat to watch me create a better one than she had ever thought possible. And in the end, that was the most perfect revenge of all. Not destruction, but irrelevance. Not anger, but indifference. Not hatred, but the kind of success that speaks so loudly it drowns out every voice that ever said it was impossible. She had tried to bury my opportunity. I had buried her limitations under an avalanche of achievement that proved every single thing she believed about me was wrong. The girl she had decided was not ready for pressure had become a woman who thrived under spotlights, who turned challenges into chances, who built organizations that changed lives and gave speeches that changed minds. The girl she had tried to protect from failure had become a woman who redefined success on her own terms and helped hundreds of others do the same. She had hidden my future because she could not see it. I had made sure she watched me create it anyway, one impossible achievement at a time, until the only protection she had left was the distance between her small life and my unlimited one. And that distance, I realized, was exactly where she belonged. Close enough to see what she had tried to steal, far enough away to never touch it again. Sometimes the best revenge is not getting even. Sometimes it is getting so far ahead that the people who tried to hold you back become invisible in your rearview mirror. Watching your success from the sidelines they chose for themselves when they decided you were not ready for the main stage. I was ready. I had always been ready. And now the whole world knew it. If this story of resilience and triumph over sabotage inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of overcoming the people who tried to limit your potential. Your support helps us share stories of real people who refused to accept other people's definitions of what they could achieve. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of dreamers who turned obstacles into opportunities.